Creating an action query in Microsoft Access is actually no more difficult than a regular select query, but does have some additional consequences. As we'll see here, one has to be aware of a couple of things when doing so. With a database and a table open, we can first decide what we want the query to do. I looked through my table here. Let's say we want to adjust the freight charge to a given country. Let's say to go up or down. Bring the freight charge to Canada down by 10%. Well, we can first filter the table to do a pre-check on some of the numbers. And I can start by just going up to the column for country, ship country here, click the drop down, uncheck select all, and turn on the check mark for Canada. Click OK. And what I see now is that I've got a total of 30 results, and I can now go over to the freight charges, and for convenience I'll sort large to small. The largest freight charge here is $3.79 and change, the next one down $3.70. So if we reduce all the freight charges to Canada by 10%, it should go down by $37 and change. The key thing is that doing this filtering lets us get a sneak peek. It allows us to see, first of all, among other things, how many records we should be changing, and we saw that the number will be 30. I'll go ahead and unfilter, turn off the filter here, come back to our original view of all 800 odd records. The simplest and safest way to create an action query is to first create a select or regular query, that is, to simply ask to see a subset of the data. So we go up to the Create tab, and we tell the program that we want to jump directly into Query Design View. Give the button here a click. We need to bring the table in question into the query space, so I'll go over here and double click the table of new orders. Brings the table in, and then I need to stretch the table down a bit so I can see all the fields. We can see that the last field there is ship country. They normally appear in the order in which they sit in the table. I'll give that a double click, and it lands in the first column of the grid down here. What I then need to do to set up this regular query is to go to the criteria space and type the name of the country, of course, Canada. Hit the tab key. The program adds the double quotes for us, which is fine. And what I now need to do is go up and run the query. And we can see that again we get the correct number of results. We have a total of 30 here. So that means that the query is going to pull up the right information. This is one of the first critical steps to make sure that the select query brings up the right batch of info, because if it does, we know we'll be changing the right info as well. Go back to Design View. We can also save the query at this point if we want. Click the Save button or Control S and QRY Canada Freight, so we know what it's about, and click OK here. The next step is to convert it to an action query. We want to have it take an action on the data in question. Specifically, we want to reduce the freight charge on all Canadian orders by 10%. So in the Query Design tab, in the ribbon here, we can tell the program that we want to create an update query. We'll talk about other queries another time, but an update query will make changes. It will edit the data. We click on Update, and down in the grid at the bottom, we now see that there's an Update To row in the grid. We have to specify which field we want to update. So what I now do is find the freight field here in the table and give it a double click. Down in the grid, I now need to go to the Update To row and type in the change I want to make. I can write what amounts to a little formula, a little piece of code. I can even cheat a little, because I can give the update space a right click and tell it I want to zoom in. Literally, I want to take a look in a dialog box where I can even change the size of the text, which I've deliberately made a little larger here. And in this next critical step, having brought up the freight field, having now gone into the zoom, what I will now do is tell it exactly what change I'm going to make. So I type the name of the field in square brackets. This way the program knows it's a field name. And the calculation. I'm going to do a multiplication by 0.9. Make it 9/10 of what it was before. Reduce it by 10%. That's really all I have to do here, is just give it that simple calculation. And at the bottom of the box, I'll go ahead and click OK. I could have typed it in there directly, but zooming in, of course, will let the video show you a little more easily what I'm doing. Now, the next step is the most critical of all. It's not hard, but it's very important. You see, when I now go up here and click the button that says Run, we get a message, we get a warning, tells us we're about to update 30 rows. That's fine, but it says once you click yes, you can't use undo to reverse the changes. Are you sure you want to do this? Well, we are, so I'll go ahead and click yes. But the most important point of the whole story here is that once we click yes, the action's performed, and we do not get a mission accomplished message. In other words, the query did what it was supposed to do. If I close the query, and save changes, of course, I go back in and filter my table once more, we can see that the two largest freight charges have indeed been reduced by 10%. And because we can't use undo, we have to just be a bit more careful. We could create another action query if we wanted or needed to reverse the result of the first one, but we can't use undo. So, one last point, creating a duplicate table testing a query on the duplicate first is advisable when it can be done. Setting a action query up and running it is not complicated. It's not too much of a problem, but it does require that we be careful about a couple of things which can fool us if we don't know about them.